The Book's Journey, From Scrolls to Screens. Take a beautiful ride on the evolution of text. Episode 1. Of Clay and Reeds, Ancient Mesopotamia, circa 3000 to 2000 BCE. My name is Enlil, and I have ink-stained fingers. Though ink might not be quite the right word for the dark mud we use to form the wedge-shaped cuneiform on clay tablets. It's not a color that washes off easily, no matter how many times I run to the Euphrates to rinse my hands. I am 15 summers old, and for most of my life I have walked the narrow alleyways of Uruk, that great Sumerian city with its imposing mud brick walls, towering ziggurat, and labyrinth of cramped workshops. I was born the son of a trader who journeyed up and down the rivers, exchanging barley, fish, and textiles for metals and precious stones. My destiny, it seemed, was to learn his trade. But as fate would have it, I showed early skill for shaping clay tablets and carefully engraving little pictures and symbols. An old scribe named Gemilu spotted me one afternoon when I was doodling scratch symbols onto a piece of wet clay. He saw something in those lines, perhaps creativity, perhaps curiosity, and insisted I join the small circle of students in the scribes' quarter of the temple complex. A city of knowledge. Uruk is said to have housed tens of thousands of people. As scribes in training, we often joke that half of them must be scribes too, because tablets are everywhere. From tax records to contracts, from royal decrees to tallies of goats and barley, the city runs on its clay documents. There's no paper, no bound codex, only the damp lumps of river clay impressed by sharpened reeds. We place the tablets in the sun to bake, or sometimes in kilns for more permanence. Our scribal school is part of the temple of Inanna, the goddess of love and war. The temple stands not just as a religious center, but also as a hub of administration. A dozen or so apprentices, including me, gather each morning before sunrise to recite and practice. Gemilu's voice booms across the courtyard. Straight lines, wedge strokes, correct angles. This is the language of the gods and of kings. I don't know about the gods, but I do know that misplacing a wedge can turn a number from 10 to 600, which can cost a merchant a fortune or cause a temple official to misjudge how many sacks of barley are needed for the next festival. Accuracy is everything in the written record. The invention of cuneiform, they say our writing began as little pictures long ago, pictographs of grain, fish, or cattle. Over the centuries, scribes refined them, turning images into abstract wedge shapes. That transformation happened slowly. New demands for speed and efficiency altered the way our stylus interacted with the clay. Instead of drawing lines, we pressed the reed tip, creating quick wedge impressions. We call it cuneiform because of those wedge marks. I delight in the subtlety. You have the vertical wedge, the horizontal wedge, the angled wedge. Place them in the right order, and the meaning blossoms. Place them in the wrong sequence, and you get nonsense. Our teacher always says, a scribe's pen can create or obliterate a kingdom of meaning. Temple duties. The temple stores thousands of tablets. Sometimes I am charged with organizing them, stacking them in earthen jars or wooden boxes, grouping them by topic. Tax tablets here, harvest yields there, palace orders on the top shelf, city council decrees on the bottom. It's a labyrinth of data. Clay is heavy, which means there's no practical way to gather everything into a single place and just flick through it, as though we had a magic wand. Instead, we carry around slabs of clay carefully when we need to reference them. I find it both thrilling and burdensome that so much knowledge rests in these lumps of dried mud. Drop a box, and you might shatter half a year's worth of records. There is talk that in certain city-states, scribes have begun to store more tablets in kilns, preserving them. Others rely more on ephemeral, sun-baked tablets that might crumble if they get wet. Gemilu sees in me a curiosity about how these records might be better organized, how the story of the city, as he calls it, might last longer than we do. The seeds of narrative. Not all tablets are administrative. Some are dedicated to legends, myths, and tales of heroic kings. In the corner of the scribal workshop lies a battered wooden chest containing a handful of older tablets. They're worn from handling, so some of the characters are faint, but Gemilu says they depict the story of Gilgamesh, the mighty king of Uruk, and his companion Enkidu. He tells me that Gilgamesh was two-thirds god and one-third man, that he built the city walls themselves, that he fought beasts and sought immortality. On nights when we've finished our daily tasks, I pull out one of those story tablets by the flickering lamp and run my fingertips over the wedge impressions. I mouth the words softly, forming them in my imagination. He who saw the deep, the foundation of the land. A chill passes through me, partly from the evening breeze, partly from the sense that these tablets contain more than numbers or temple proclamations. They hold a universal longing for something greater. They hold narrative. Gemilu says that the kings of Sumer realize the power of these stories. My curiosity soars. Perhaps there is more to writing than simply telling the temple that a merchant owes 10 goats or that a farmer must deliver 20 sacks of grain. Perhaps we can capture our entire world, its passions, triumphs, failures, on these clay tablets. Rumors of Akkad. In my 14th year, an exciting rumor circulates. A great king from Akkad, Sargon is his name, is conquering city-states across Mesopotamia. Soldiers speak of his unstoppable armies. Scribes speak of how he is commanding records to be written not only in Sumerian, but also in the Akkadian tongue. This is new to me. Bilingual tablets. I see them once, brought by a courier from Kish. The top line in Sumerian cuneiform, the bottom line in Akkadian cuneiform. Two languages sharing the same system of wedges. Another wonder of writing. A few months later, Sargon's envoys arrive in Uruk. I watch from the scribes' courtyard as they enter the temple, bearing gifts and demands, silver and livestock, along with an edict. They want the scribes of Uruk to produce records that unify the kingdom, to standardize the wedge shapes so that Sumerian and Akkadian script might meld more seamlessly. We set to work, forming committees to decide how each sign might look, whether in Sumerian or Akkadian. Gemilu helps shape the new standard signs. I find myself lost in the swirl of politics and power. In the process, however, writing evolves further. Our city's scribes are forced to simplify certain signs, remove ambiguities, and adopt new ones. A day at the royal court. One day, I am taken to the royal palace for a reading of an official decree. I step over massive thresholds of baked brick and see the lavish courtyard teeming with officials, soldiers, and servants. A newly baked clay tablet is placed onto a small podium. An official gestures me forward. I am to read the decree aloud. In the name of Sargon, king of Kish, lord of the four corners, the temple of Inanna shall record all harvest yields using standardized cuneiform. No man or woman shall alter these signs upon penalty of the king's displeasure. My voice trembles, but I press on. The words echo through the courtyard. The official glances at me approvingly. My role as a scribe is an honor. I give voice to the text, bridging the gap between the clay's silent impression and the ears of the city. Personal aspirations. At night, I dream of shaping more than administrative texts. The Gilgamesh tablets are always on my mind. There's something in that mythic story about searching for eternal life, confronting gods and cosmic journeys. That resonates. Are we not doing the same with these clay tablets, yearning for immortality by preserving our words? One evening, Gemilu finds me hunched over a fresh clay tablet. I've etched out the beginnings of a personal reflection. I, Ur-Enlil, scribe of Uruk, have questioned the shape of the world. My teacher leans over my shoulder, reading silently. He places a wrinkled hand on my arm and smiles. Right, my son. Our city needs more than records. We need dreamers. The Edict of Naram-Sin. Sargon's grandson, Naram-Sin, eventually rises to power. There is a new shift. Naram-Sin proclaims himself a god king, erecting steles with cuneiform declarations of his divine status. The scribes are called upon to produce more texts praising him. Some older scribes grumble in private at this vanity. I keep my thoughts to myself. Who am I to question a king? But the scribal workshop grows in importance. Being literate in cuneiform makes one invaluable to the administration. Temple officials, palace bureaucrats, and traveling merchants come to me daily, begging for a quick record or a letter to be carried to another city. We do not have a mail system in the modern sense, but caravans and messengers carry these clay letters from city to city. When I press my stylus onto the clay for a merchant's letter, I marvel at how portable knowledge becomes when set in clay. If one is careful, a small baked tablet can travel hundreds of miles, crossing deserts and mountains, delivering instructions or pleas to distant lands. In some ways, these lumps of earth carry the voice of the writer across time and space. Fragments of a Sumerian legacy. By my 20th summer, change is once again at hand. The Sumerian city-states weaken and new powers rise. The scribes who once wrote in pure Sumerian are forced to adapt. Our script endures, but the language morphs. The Babylonians come. They keep cuneiform for centuries. The Assyrians, too, carry on the wedge-shaped legacy. In all these transitions, the clay tablet remains the standard. No one here has seen or even imagined a scroll made of papyrus. That belongs to the distant Egyptians. I spend my days now overseeing younger scribes in the workshop. Gemilu has grown old, and I fear the day he will pass on to join our ancestors. But I also realize that everything we've recorded will survive, baked into tablets, stored in temple archives, or even archived in palace libraries. The first time a soldier from a distant land calls me to produce a set of instructions for building a siege machine, I shudder at what knowledge can do, help or harm, a glimpse of the future. One evening, as I help gather tablets for the city's archives, I see something remarkable. A visitor from Elam has come with a gift for the temple, a small cylinder seal and a large collection of tablets from his homeland. The text is cuneiform, but the language is Elamite. He believes in the power of writing to bind treaties, to record births, to preserve genealogies. It makes me realize how expansive this script has become, bridging tongues and nations. Eventually, I hear rumors of scribes in far corners of Mesopotamia creating entire libraries of such tablets. They store them meticulously, referencing them for laws, histories, myths, medical knowledge, and even astronomy. Writing is no longer just a tool of commerce and the temple. It is a technology that fosters scholarship and imagination. A scribe's legacy. Now, at the age of 30, I have begun to compile my life's reflections onto clay. The process is slow. I must shape a new tablet for each segment of my story, wedge by wedge. But I do it with pride, for I sense that these recordings might outlive me. I recall the first time I read from the Gilgamesh tablets and felt the stir of wonder. Today, I try to capture that same wonder in my own words. Will future scribes read my lines and see a window into our present day, just as I see a window into Gilgamesh's era when I trace the old story tablets? My mother stands behind me as I write one afternoon. She's grown old and bent, but there's joy in her eyes. You carry the voice of our family. Someday your words will speak for us when we are dust. I swallow the lump in my throat. She is right. Our words on these clay tablets are the closest thing to immortality we can hope for. The tides of time. As years pass, the city of Uruk experiences upheavals, invasions, rebellions, the rise and fall of dynasties. Still, scribes endure, producing tablets for each new ruler. Some tablets are lost, broken, or eroded by floods. Others remain in the storerooms. My personal reflection tablets. I hide them away in a clay pot, sealed with a stopper of bitumen, in the hopes they will survive the ravages of time. I do not know how many generations will come after me, or what forms of writing they will inherit. Perhaps clay will remain forever. Perhaps the peoples to the west or across the seas will craft something else to bear their words. But cuneiform is our star in the sky, a beacon of knowledge and memory carved from the earth itself. One final glance at the swirling Euphrates under the pink light of dusk, and I allow myself a moment of quiet pride. We scribes have done something miraculous. We have learned to press our thoughts into clay, forging a bridge between minds across distances and ages. If knowledge is power, then these wedge-shaped symbols are the foundation upon which cities rise and civilizations expand. Episode 2. Papyrus Dreams. Ancient Egypt, circa 1500 BCE. My name is Naunacht, daughter of the house of Herinifer, and I was born amidst the rustle of papyrus reeds. While my father served as a scribe in the House of Life at Thebes, I grew up with the scent of ink and the soft crackle of rolled papyrus. Here in Kemet, what distant foreigners call Egypt, we have a gift from our god Hapi, the Nile, the tall aquatic plant whose layered strips we press and dry into sheets, forming what we call papyrus. When I was a child, I would watch father gently unroll a scroll on his writing board. He would dip his reed brush into a pot of soot-based ink and glide across the surface, forming the elegant signs of hieroglyphs, or sometimes the quicker strokes of hieratic script. Unlike the heavy clay tablets used by our neighbors in Mesopotamia, our scrolls are light, flexible, and easy to carry. That difference, father would say, lets the words flow more freely, like the river itself. The House of Life. The House of Life is a sacred institution attached to the temple, where knowledge is copied, stored, and taught. Priests, scribes, and scholars gather to create texts not just of administration and trade, but also of science, astronomy, medicine, and spells for the afterlife. Father, being a respected scribe, oversees the copying of funerary texts, particularly the famous Book of the Dead. I remember the first time he allowed me to hold a finished papyrus scroll. It was a recreation of the spell for opening of the mouth, used in burial rites to ensure the deceased could speak and breathe in the afterlife. The lines of hieroglyphs were accompanied by vivid illustrations, a jackal-headed Anubis performing the ritual, the bay bird fluttering overhead. "Treat it gently," father told me. "This text guides souls to eternity." I felt something akin to reverence as the papyrus brushed against my fingertips. This was no mere commodity. It was a bridge between life and death, between mortal and divine. Mornings in Thebes. Each day the city of Thebes awakens to the hustle of traders, the clamor of donkey hooves, and the glow of the rising sun on the great temple complexes of Karnak and Luxor. My own routine is straightforward. Rise at dawn, wash, and hurry to the House of Life to help father with any tasks he sets. My duties vary, mixing ink, preparing sheets of papyrus by weaving strips and pressing them under heavy stones, or sometimes simply observing the older scribes so I can learn from their graceful hieratic script. We have two main scripts here: hieroglyphs, the sacred carvings used on temple walls, tombs, and in formal religious texts; hieratic, a cursive form derived from hieroglyphs used for everyday writing, administrative documents, and record-keeping. Some scribes have also begun using demotic, an even more streamlined script for popular use, though that flourishes more in later periods. In father's day, hieratic is the bread and butter for day-to-day tasks. The power of papyrus. Our writing surfaces. Papyrus rolls. We glue sheets end to end to create long scrolls. Important texts, like religious books or royal decrees, can stretch for many feet. Ostraca. Broken pieces of pottery or limestone flakes used for quick notes or practice. Father always reminds me that papyrus is valuable. One must not waste it on doodles. Ostraca are for doodles. Papyrus is for the texts that matter. The demand for papyrus is high. Merchants transport it along the Nile, trading with other regions. Stories reach us that in distant lands, like Byblos in Phoenicia, Egyptian papyrus is prized for its convenience. A commission from the queen. One day, father receives an extraordinary summons. Queen Hatshepsut, the woman pharaoh, has ordered the creation of new scrolls to record her divine birth and rightful claim to the throne. Father is to lead the scribal team in the House of Life for this commission. For weeks, we labor to produce the finest papyrus. I watch Father carefully measure the strips, ensuring uniform thickness. We soak them in the muddy waters of a papyrus pool, then lay them in 2 layers, one horizontal, one vertical. We press them under heavy stone slabs to fuse them. After drying under the hot Egyptian sun, the sheets become smooth and supple. Then the scribes set to writing. They depict Hatshepsut's lineage and her relationship to the god Amun. They detail her accomplishments, expeditions to the land of Punt, the construction of her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri, the obelisks at Karnak. All of these with intricate hieroglyphs, accompanied by colorful vignettes of her triumphant processions. I am entrusted with a minor role in the corner of the scriptorium, copying small references from older temple records so Father can incorporate them. My heart swells with pride that I am part of something so grand. Papyrus for the dead, papyrus for the living. Egyptian life revolves around preparation for death and the afterlife, but papyrus is not only for funerary texts. We record medical treatises that describe surgeries and remedies, astronomical observations that track the cycles of stars, even poetry praising love and wine. There is a papyrus in our archives known as the Ebers Papyrus, which details hundreds of medical remedies for stomach aches, for wounds, for snake bites. Another, the Rind Mathematical Papyrus, records a wealth of knowledge on geometry and fractions. To me, these scrolls prove that papyrus carries the breath of life itself. Knowledge that might fade from memory endures, unrolled and read by future generations of scribes and scholars. My father often says, "A single scroll can hold the wisdom of countless lifetimes." A meeting with a foreign scribe. Late one evening, a scribe from the land of Canaan visits our house of life, accompanied by a caravan of traders. He marvels at the crisp lines of our papyrus, remarking how his homeland relies more on clay tablets. He's curious about our scripts, inquiring about the magical bird and snake symbols in hieroglyphs. I watch Father politely explain how hieroglyphs contain both pictorial symbols and phonetic components. He also demonstrates writing in hieratic, swiftly gliding his reed pen with a fluid grace. The foreign scribe is awestruck. He confesses that in his home city, carrying a clay tablet is cumbersome. A scroll is so much lighter. "Truly," he says, "this is the future of writing." I cannot help but beam with pride at the recognition of our papyrus technology. That night, I dream of a day when maybe all the lands around the Great Sea will adopt our writing surface. An encounter with hieroglyph carvers. Though I spend most of my time with Father in the scriptorium, I have a friend named Senenmut who works as a stone carver in the temple precinct. He chisels hieroglyphs into grand walls and obelisks. One afternoon, I wander over to his workshop. There, the pounding of mallets and the scraping of chisels echo. Great blocks of limestone or granite bear the narratives of kings and queens. Senenmut complains that carving hieroglyphs into stone is slow, laborious, and prone to error. One slip, and you ruin the entire line. But once carved, those words last for centuries. With papyrus, we can make changes more easily as we write, but a scroll might degrade over time, especially if neglected or subjected to moisture. Stone is permanent, papyrus ephemeral, yet Father always counters that a carefully stored scroll can last for centuries as well, safe in the dry tombs or the temple archives. The royal library. A rumor spreads through Thebes of a vast library that the pharaoh or high priest keeps under lock and key. Some call it the House of Scrolls, others say it's simply a secret chamber in the temple where special texts are guarded. My imagination sparks. Could there really be an entire chamber devoted to hundreds, perhaps thousands of papyrus rolls? I question Father, but he only smiles knowingly and says, "Knowledge is power, and power can be dangerous in the wrong hands." I surmise that certain spells, arcane rituals, and political records must remain hidden lest they be used to manipulate the gods or the people. Upheaval and transition. Time passes. Hatshepsut's reign eventually ends. Thutmose III comes to power, and there is a period where certain references to Hatshepsut are removed from public monuments. I wonder about our scrolls in the House of Life. Are they in danger of being altered or destroyed to appease the new regime's desire for historical revision? To my relief, the scrolls remain mostly untouched, though some official records are quietly edited. In hushed tones, Father explains that papyrus scrolls are easier to hide than giant stone carvings. Some scribes store them away in sealed jars or compartments behind temple walls. Despite the attempts to rewrite history, knowledge on papyrus can survive in the hidden corners of the archives. A brush with mortality. My father grows ill one harsh winter. His breathing becomes labored, his skin sallow. The House of Life physicians attempt remedies described in our medical scrolls: ointments, potions, incantations. I take solace in the fact that the knowledge we glean from papyrus might save him, but the god's will proves otherwise. He passes at dawn, the papyrus slip with a protective spell still clenched in his hand. His death hits me like a sandstorm. For days I can hardly eat or speak. When the time comes to prepare his burial, I assist in selecting the funerary papyrus that will go with him. The book of going forth by day, replete with spells ensuring safe passage through the underworld. I copy a special invocation on a fresh sheet, dedicating it to him. As I write, tears stain the edges. Father, may your heart be light when weighed against the feather of Maat. In that moment, I fully grasp the dual power of papyrus. It carries the recorded wisdom of the living, and it paves the way for a blessed afterlife. Stepping into Father's role. In the months that follow, I take over many of Father's duties as a scribe. It is unusual for a woman to hold such a prominent scribal position, but the House of Life has come to respect my skill. My mother remains at home, weaving baskets and caring for younger siblings, while I bring in payment from copying texts for the temple. A particularly important commission arrives to create a new copy of the Book of the Heavenly Cow, a myth that describes how humanity was almost destroyed by the goddess Hathor and how Re retreated into the sky on the back of a celestial cow. It's a complex text with intricate vignettes. I labor for weeks, ensuring every line of hieratic is consistent with older copies. I cannot help but recall Father's teachings that our scribal craft is more than a job. It is a sacred calling. In rewriting the myths, we keep the gods' stories alive. We connect the present with the earliest times. Conversations with the future. One day, I unroll an older scroll from the archives, and I notice an annotation at the bottom. It's the name of a scribe who copied the text 50 years ago, accompanied by a short personal statement. I, Seshmos, copied this faithfully from an older version. May the gods look favorably upon my work. A flicker of kinship crosses my heart. This scribe lived decades before me, yet through his words I sense his devotion and humility. I add my own small annotation beneath his, bridging time. I, Naunacht, daughter of Herenifer, restore this text anew for the House of Life. May future scribes keep it well. In that moment, I see how papyrus is a living chain, linking generations of scribes and scholars, a glimpse of foreign influence. As trade with the Greek islands and further to the Levant intensifies, I hear travelers speak of other forms of writing, alphabetic scripts that use fewer symbols than our thousands of hieroglyphs. Some, like the Phoenicians, are rumored to have a phonetic system of only 24 letters. They inscribe them on parchment or occasionally on papyrus purchased from Egypt. I wonder if one day Kemet's divine script will be replaced by a simpler system. The idea unsettles me, for the mystical nature of hieroglyphs is central to my identity as a scribe. But Father once told me that writing evolves, just as kingdoms do, and though our land reveres tradition, the outside world may beckon with new ideas. Farewell to Thebes. Years pass, and I approach middle age. Thebes remains grand, but the seat of power sometimes shifts to other cities. I receive an invitation from a distant noble to become a personal scribe in Memphis. It's an opportunity to see new temples, new libraries, and perhaps gather knowledge from far corners of Egypt. After much deliberation, I accept. Before I depart, I visit Father's tomb. I place a fresh papyrus offering inside, carefully rolled and tied with a linen ribbon. I recite a prayer, hoping my words in this new scroll will keep his name alive. Then I gather my belongings and board a small boat on the Nile. The boat's pilot stacks some of my precious papyrus scrolls in a chest, cautioning me they mustn't get wet. As I watch the receding skyline of Thebes, a swirl of emotions floods me. I am leaving the city that taught me everything, where Father passed down the art of shaping knowledge on papyrus. But I also know that as I travel north, I will carry our scribal tradition within me. In my chest sits a trove of scrolls, some old, some new, each a testament to the Egyptian mastery of papyrus. I think back to Father's words. A single scroll can hold the wisdom of countless lifetimes. In that scroll chest, I carry not only my father's legacy, but also the hopes of a scribe who believes in the everlasting power of words. Perhaps, in Memphis, I will add new chapters to this unfolding story, new texts, new spells, new treaties. Perhaps I will see how foreign scribes adapt or adopt our papyrus. The wind rustles across the river. My journey begins. Episode 3. From Scroll to Codex, Classical and Late Antique Period, circa 1st to 5th century CE. I am Tiberius Scribonianus, a Greek-speaking Roman citizen hailing from Alexandria, though my family claims distant roots in Athens. My mother once called me a child of libraries, for I grew up in the shadow of the great library of Alexandria. That magnificent institution, with its rows upon rows of papyrus scrolls, shaped my youth and my destiny. But the world is changing. In the time of the Caesars, knowledge no longer lives solely in scrolls. Something new is emerging, a different form of book, the codex. I first encountered it when a traveling Christian teacher handed me a small collection of parchment leaves, bound together along one edge. It struck me as peculiar. Why not store these texts on a scroll, as the Greeks have done for centuries? The teacher just smiled. It is easier to reference passages in this format, he said, flipping from one page to another with surprising speed. A youth in Alexandria. My earliest memories involve exploring the Serapeum, the daughter library to the Great Library. My father, a minor functionary in the Roman administration, had a modest position overseeing shipments of papyrus. Egypt, as always, remains the empire's breadbasket, and its papyrus is vital for bureaucratic records. I spent my days learning Greek letters, then Latin, carefully copying texts from the scrolls. The scribes in Alexandria still adhere to the centuries-old tradition of writing on papyrus scrolls. They store them in pigeonhole-like shelves. To read a text, one must unroll the scroll from the left and roll it up on the right, or vice versa, scanning lines horizontally. I used to find it elegant, but as I grow older, I notice the inefficiency of referencing a middle passage or comparing two distant parts of a text. A strange new format. Rumors from Rome and beyond suggest that some scribes, particularly among the Christian communities, favor the codex. Instead of rolling a long sheet of papyrus, they fold sheets of parchment or papyrus into quires, stack them, and bind them on one side. The result is something that resembles a collection of tablets. The key difference is how you read it. Instead of unrolling, you flip. You can jump from page to page without the tedious rolling and unrolling. As a curious youth, I wonder, could this be the future of reading? One day, in the marketplace of Alexandria, I come across a traveling merchant from Asia Minor. He shows me a small codex of the Gospel of Mark, written in Greek on parchment. The pages, though not as smooth as papyrus, have a sturdy feel. The edges are protected by wooden covers. Inside, the text is arranged in columns that are easy to navigate. I run my fingers along the binding thread. Could this format challenge the revered scroll tradition? The rise of parchment. Parchment, made from animal skins, is more durable than papyrus in certain climates. In the dryness of Egypt, papyrus lasts well, but in damp regions it decays quickly. Roman scribes, especially in the western provinces, begin to favor parchment. I also hear that in the city of Pergamum in Asia Minor, there is a flourishing parchment industry, so much so that the word parchment itself is said to derive from Pergamena. I recall Father's disapproval. He has stakes in the papyrus trade, so he scoffs at any notion that parchment codices will replace the venerable scroll. I, however, cannot help but feel the quiet allure of this new technology. Scholarship in transition. As I grow into my teenage years, I study at a local academy. We read the classics, Homer, Plato, Aristotle, from scrolls. But some of my tutors keep personal notebooks, or membranae, which are small codices made of scrap parchment. They jot down notes, references, and quotes in these flexible notebooks. In hushed tones, the tutors sometimes mention that among certain scholarly circles, the codex is gaining favor for personal use. It's more compact, easier to store, and you can write on both sides of a page. Scrolls often only carry writing on one side of the papyrus. Economical, they whisper, especially when parchment is expensive. A trip to Rome. At the age of 20, I accompany my father on a business trip to Rome. The city overwhelms me, its grand forums, towering arches, bustling crowds. My father has come to negotiate a new contract for papyrus shipments. Meanwhile, I roam the streets, seeking out libraries and booksellers. I find a shop near the forum that sells both scrolls and codices. The proprietor, a Greek freedman named Dionysius, explains that wealthy patrons sometimes commission codices of classical works for their private libraries. A well-bound codex of Virgil's Aeneid might fetch a handsome price. But do not misunderstand, Dionysius says. Scrolls are still the standard for most literature. The codex is fashionable among certain Christians and a handful of intellectuals. Yet, the scroll is far from dead. I purchase a small codex copy of Seneca's letters. It feels liberating to turn the parchment pages, to mark a specific letter with a wax bookmark, and return to it later without fuss. The more I use it, the more I see how the codex might revolutionize reading and study. Encounter with early Christianity. During my stay in Rome, I visit the house of a senator who recently converted to Christianity. He invites me to a gathering where they read from the Gospels. Instead of producing a scroll from an ark or chest, a reader lifts a codex from a table. The pages are well worn, filled with Greek text. The assembled listeners remark on how convenient it is to find a particular passage. They flip to it quickly, rather than fussing with the long expanse of a scroll. I listen to them discuss how, in times of persecution, a codex is easier to conceal and transport. A single codex can contain multiple Gospels or even the entire body of Christian scriptures, something that would require multiple scrolls. For me, a student of letters, the codex is no mere curiosity. It represents a shift in the way people engage with written material, a shift that could alter the course of learning, scholarship, and faith. Returning to Alexandria. When I return to Alexandria, Father senses my enthusiasm for the codex. He grumbles, for he sees me less engaged in the papyrus trade. Our family's livelihood depends on the continuation of scroll usage, yet I cannot ignore the growing tide. In the library and scholarly circles, I overhear debates. Papyrus is cheaper and suitable for copying large works, but the codex is more durable, more convenient. A scroll can be elegantly stored in a jar or chest, but a codex can be stacked upright on shelves. The Great Library, alas, has suffered multiple losses over the centuries: fires, looting. Some scrolls remain, but countless others are gone. I wonder if the codex, with its protective covers and more resilient materials, might have better survived these catastrophes. The Emperor's Edict. Word arrives that Emperor Diocletian has instituted new administrative reforms. The Roman bureaucracy is expanding, and official edicts now appear in both scroll and codex form. The empire's soldiers sometimes carry small codices with manuals or official documents. The Christians, now numbering many, continue to produce codex Bibles. I take on the role of a copyist at a local scriptorium, bridging the old and the new. My main tasks: copy Greek classics onto papyrus scrolls for wealthy patrons who want them in the traditional format. Copy Christian texts onto parchment codices for local congregations, as well as for traveling bishops who want portable libraries. My days blur as I switch from rolling papyrus to flipping parchment pages. One is smooth and reed-like, the other animal skin tough. Intellectual crossroads. In my 30th year, I reach a crossroads. My father passes away, leaving me a modest inheritance tied to the papyrus trade. The business is still profitable. Roman bureaucrats require reams of papyrus for records. Yet my heart lies in the quiet scriptorium, exploring new ways to compile knowledge. I begin a personal project, copying fragments of Aristotle's works into a codex format. This might be the first time these philosophical treatises appear in codex form. My aim is to create a reference volume that I can consult easily, flipping between passages on logic, ethics, and metaphysics. I also leave ample margins for annotations, marginalia that would be awkward on a scroll. From pagan to Christian hands. The religious climate in Alexandria grows tense. Pagan temples clash with Christian congregations, each vying for power. The scroll, once a symbol of Greek learning and pagan tradition, stands in contrast to the codex, a symbol of Christian scripture. I see acquaintances on both sides. Some pagans embrace the codex purely for practical reasons. Some Christians still use scrolls for certain liturgical readings. But I cannot deny that as Christian authority spreads, so does the codex. The Bishop of Alexandria encourages scribes to produce more codices of the Bible, of commentaries, of the writings of the early church fathers. Demand surges. Traveling to Constantinople. Another major event. Emperor Constantine founds his new capital in Byzantium, renamed Constantinople. Word spreads that he endorses Christianity, and the codex form of scripture gains prestige in the imperial court. The emperor even commissions copies of the Christian scriptures for churches, likely in codex form. Curiosity compels me to travel to Constantinople. There, in the shadows of rising churches and imperial palaces, I witness scribes hard at work in newly established scriptoria. Parchment codices, sometimes richly illustrated, line the tables. The sense of transformation is palpable. The Roman Empire, once unified under the scroll, is gradually transitioning to the codex. I speak with a court scholar who explains that the codex suits the new Christian empire's identity, something distinct from the pagan past. He also mentions a practical dimension: to unify large texts, like the entire Christian Bible, into fewer volumes. This is not as feasible with scrolls, which become unwieldy when too long. Late antique book culture. By my 40s, I see that the writing world has become a tapestry of scrolls and codices. Greek and Roman classics still exist in scrolls, though some are being copied into codex form. Christian writings almost exclusively appear in codices. In the eastern parts of the empire, Greek remains dominant. In the west, Latin codices flourish. At a gathering of Alexandrian scholars, we debate the future. My friend, Theon, insists that scrolls will never truly die. They have millennia of tradition behind them. Another scholar, Menelaus, counters that the codex will eventually displace the scroll entirely. The future belongs to the bound book, he declares. I, Tiberius Scribonianus, stand in the middle. My heritage ties me to the revered scroll tradition of Greece, yet my experiences in Rome, Alexandria, and Constantinople reveal the codex's superiority in many respects. My dream is that we preserve all knowledge, pagan, Christian, secular, scientific, in whatever format ensures its survival. Reflections on the Eve of Change. Sitting in my modest home overlooking the Alexandrian harbour, I keep a small personal library. Scrolls of Homer, Plato, Euripides, which I inherited from father. Codices of the Gospels, Seneca's letters, and my own compilation of Aristotle. On a plain wooden table, I place a scroll and a codex side by side. The scroll is elegant, venerable. The codex is practical, innovative. Each, in its own way, is a gateway to knowledge. If the Great Library taught me anything, it is that knowledge transcends physical form. If one door closes, we open another. I dip my quill into ink, writing these reflections on a fresh sheet of parchment, which I will bind into my personal codex. Perhaps future generations will read these words and understand the transition we lived through. Will they see the scroll as a relic of the past, or will it remain side by side with the codex in the centuries to come? A breeze rustles the papyrus curtains at my window. Ships in the harbour load bales of Egyptian papyrus, bound for far-off lands. My chest of codices rests by the wall, ready to accompany me if I ever journey again. On this cusp between two eras, I sense the unstoppable tide of progress. The codex is more than a novelty. It is the vessel of tomorrow's knowledge. Episode 4. Illuminations in the Dark. The Medieval Scriptoria, circa 8th to 12th century CE. I am Brother Aidan of the Lindisfarne Priory, an island monastery off the northeast coast of England. They call our home the Holy Island, though in these tumultuous times no place feels entirely safe from Viking raids. Yet within our walls we nurture a sacred art, the copying and illumination of manuscripts. We no longer rely on scrolls. Those belong to a distant past. Here we craft codices. Our pages are mostly vellum, a fine parchment made from calfskin. We transform them into intricate gospel books that marry text and imagery with breathtaking beauty. Each stroke of the quill, each swirl of colored ink is an act of devotion. A world in upheaval. Following the fall of the Western Roman Empire, much of Europe endures chaos, migrations, wars, the fragmentation of states. Learning and scholarship persist mainly in monasteries and cathedral schools. We, the monks, see ourselves as keepers of knowledge. Our scriptoria become sanctuaries where classical texts and holy scripture are copied for posterity. When I first arrived at Lindisfarne as an oblate child, I was in awe of the scriptorium's hushed reverence. Rows of wooden desks angled to catch the best light from small windows. Shelves holding jars of pigments. Lapis lazuli from distant mines, verdigris, ochres, gold leaf, and the manuscripts themselves, some incomplete, some heavily decorated, all meticulously crafted. The art of illumination. My daily routine begins at dawn with Matins prayer. Then we gather in the refectory for a simple meal of bread and watery ale. By sunrise, I'm in the scriptorium, scraping the vellum pages with a pumice stone, smoothing them in preparation for writing. We rule the lines lightly with a stylus. Then the text is copied from older manuscripts, one letter at a time. Scribe with care, our master illuminator says, for these are the words of the Lord. Once the lettering is done, the illumination begins. We add elaborate initials, large letters filled with interlacing beasts, serpentine vines, and geometric patterns reminiscent of Celtic art. We embed gold leaf, which catches the candlelight with a heavenly glow. I have spent entire weeks finishing a single page, ensuring that each stroke of paint or gold is perfect. Manuscripts in Latin and beyond. Our primary focus is the Latin Vulgate Bible, the Word of God in the translation of St. Jerome. But we also copy the writings of the Church Fathers, Augustine, Gregory the Great, Ambrose. Occasionally, we preserve fragments of pagan authors, like Virgil or Ovid, though some brethren find that controversial. In some scripts, we incorporate local tongues. The Lindisfarne Gospels, for instance, have Old English glosses scribbled above the Latin text, a rudimentary translation for those who cannot read Latin. I marvel at how the shapes of the Anglo-Saxon runes mingle with the Roman letters, a silent testament to a blending of cultures. A Viking raid. Alas, the year 793 brings terror. Viking longships appear on the horizon. By the time we see them, it's too late. Fierce Norsemen storm our shores, pillage the treasury, slay some of my brothers, and set parts of the monastery ablaze. The scriptorium is ransacked, but by divine providence, a few of us manage to hide the most precious manuscripts in a secret niche behind the altar. I crouch in the darkness, clutching the Lindisfarne Gospels. My hands tremble and tears blur my vision. I think of all the hours spent in devotion, all the care poured into every letter, and the possibility that these wonders might be destroyed. The Vikings depart as quickly as they came, leaving devastation in their wake. Exile and return. We survive, though barely. Several brethren and I take the salvaged manuscripts and flee inland. For months we wander, seeking refuge in friendly monasteries. Each time we arrive at a safe haven, we share our manuscript's glory, pages shimmering with divine light. The local monks are awestruck, and some vow to replicate such beauty in their own scriptoria. Eventually, we return to Lindisfarne and rebuild. The monastery stands again, albeit humbler. Our mission continues to copy and illuminate. We produce more gospel books, psalters, and prayer books. Each time a new novice arrives, we pass on the traditions of script and illumination. A gathering of scribes. Over time, I hear tales of other monastic centres engaged in the same sacred labour. Wearmouth Jarrow in Northumbria, Iona in Scotland, Kells in Ireland. Their gospel books, too, were revered for their artistry. I dream of journeying to the Abbey of Kells to witness the famous Book of Kells. They say its illuminations are so intricate that angels must have guided the scribe's hand. One summer, a monk from Iona visits us, bringing with him a partial copy of the Book of Kells. The pages dazzle with swirling Celtic knots, vibrant colours, and a majesty beyond words. Our prior admires it reverently. This is the harmony of faith and art. It confirms that we are not alone. Across the British Isles, and indeed across Frankish lands, scriptoria are beacons of light in a dark age. Carolingian Renaissance. Word reaches us that on the continent, a great king, Charlemagne, has forged a vast empire. He invests heavily in education and the preservation of knowledge. Monasteries in his realm adopt a standardized handwriting called Carolingian minuscule, which is clear, legible, and uniform. Some scholars proclaim it the future of all Latin texts. Here at Lindisfarne, our insular script is more angular and ornate, but I see the appeal of the Carolingian style: simplicity, consistency, ease of reading. The empire's scribes meticulously copy classical works, Christian treatises, and law codes, ensuring their survival for future generations. I realize that a quiet renaissance of learning is unfolding, centered in scriptoria from Aachen to Tours, preserving the ancient world. Occasionally, we receive manuscripts that are not strictly Christian, fragments of Aristotle or Pliny the Elder, treatises on geometry or medicine. The Church decrees that such knowledge can be preserved, provided it does not contradict the faith. Some monks resent copying pagan authors. Others, like me, see it as part of our duty to safeguard wisdom. In the margins of these classical texts, we sometimes add notes in Latin or Old English, clarifying a difficult concept or linking it to a biblical passage. Thus, the text evolves. The classical world meets the medieval worldview, fused by the flickering light of a monastery lamp. Life in the scriptorium. Years pass, and I grow older. My eyesight falters, my hand trembles. Yet my devotion to the art of the manuscript remains. Each morning I smell the familiar scent of vellum and ink. I hear the soft scratching of quills. I see novices squinting over their lines, tongues peeking from their mouths in concentration. I remember myself in their place decades ago, brimming with youthful fervor. We use different inks. Black ink, made from oak gall, iron sulfate, and gum arabic. Red ink, rubrics, used for headings or important words, derived from red ochre or cinnabar. Gold leaf, carefully applied with egg white or gum, then burnished to shine. The novices occasionally grumble about the painstaking process. I remind them that each letter is a prayer, a chance to glorify God. They nod, although I sense their eagerness to see the final product. The scribal colophon. In some manuscripts, the scribe writes a short note at the end, known as a colophon. They might beg the reader's forgiveness for any errors or ask for prayers for the scribe's soul. After finishing a particularly lavish gospel book, I pen a colophon in trembling script. Brother Aidan, sinner of Lindisfarne, completed this book in the year of our Lord 812. Pray for me, dear reader, that Christ may grant me mercy. These words echo through time. Perhaps centuries from now, another scribe or reader will see my name and pray for my soul, continuing the chain of faith and scholarship. Illuminated glory. Looking at a completed illuminated manuscript, I feel a surge of awe. The pages glow as though lit from within. The swirling designs transport me to a realm of divine mystery. This is the fruit of countless hours, days, years of labor. In an age marked by war and plague, we have built a haven of beauty and learning. I wonder about the future of these codices. Will they endure beyond my lifetime? Will future generations read these pages with reverence? The older I get, the more I realize that each manuscript is a fragile vessel. Parchment is sturdy, but not invincible. A single fire, a single raid, can reduce centuries of effort to ash. Yet we must persevere, copying, illuminating, preserving. A vision of tomorrow. Late at night, as I doze by the scriptorium's dying candle, I dream of a time when knowledge might spread more swiftly. Even now, word of new techniques in book production filters through from the continent, improved binding methods, finer inks. There are rumors that in distant places like the Abbasid Caliphate, scholars develop advanced papermaking, introduced from the East. Paper, they say, is cheaper than parchment, but that is a story for another day. Here at Lindisfarne, our art remains the illuminated manuscript. We shape each codex with devotion, trusting that what we preserve will guide souls to salvation, enlighten minds with ancient wisdom, and reflect God's glory in painted form. One day, perhaps, scribes of the future will look upon our Celtic knots and golden letters and say, "Behold how they labored in faith." To me, that is enough. Episode 5. The Press Heard Round the World, the Gutenberg Revolution, 15th to 16th century CE. I am Hans Pfützner, once a humble apprentice to a goldsmith in the bustling city of Mainz. My world changed the day I stepped into the workshop of Johannes Gutenberg, the man who would ignite a revolution with his printing press. How could I have known that setting metal type and inking wooden presses would reshape all of Europe? Goldsmith roots. My father taught me the basics of metalwork, smelting, casting, engraving. But it was in Gutenberg's workshop that I realized metal could bear words, entire texts, repeated infinitely. Gutenberg had tinkered for years with the concept of movable type, individual letters cast in metal, arranged in a frame to form lines of text, then inked and pressed onto paper. The idea wasn't entirely new. In distant lands like China and Korea, forms of movable type existed. But in Europe, such a device would be radical, especially if perfected for mass production. I remember the workshop's cramped quarters, the smell of hot metal from the casting molds, the reek of ink and oil, the perpetual haze of smoke. Gutenberg himself was a fervent, meticulous man, prone to bursts of inspiration and frustration. He demanded absolute precision, a mysterious endeavor. At first, we kept our project secret. Gutenberg feared that if word got out, others might steal the idea, or that the church authorities might disapprove, seeing the duplication of scripture outside monastic scriptoria as suspect. We worked quietly on prototypes, forging typepieces, building a press modeled after a wine press, experimenting with oil-based inks that adhered well to metal. Many nights I saw Gutenberg pacing in the dim candlelight, muttering about spacing, alignment, the uniformity of letters. He insisted each metal type must be identical for the final text to look consistent. "This is the future of books," he would say, eyes gleaming. "Soon, scribes with quills will not keep pace with the speed of the press." The birth of the Gutenberg Bible. Our crowning achievement emerged around 1455. The Gutenberg Bible, a 2-volume Latin Bible with 42 lines of type per page. I recall the thrill of seeing the first printed pages. crisp black lettering set with remarkable uniformity, each page replicated exactly. We later decorated some copies with hand-painted initials to mimic the beauty of illuminated manuscripts. That moment, I can still feel the surge in my chest, was when I realized we had unleashed something monumental. Instead of copying each Bible by hand over months or years, we could produce scores of copies in far less time. The cost per book, though still not cheap, would eventually plummet. Ordinary people, not just the wealthy or the clergy, might one day own books. Strife and betrayal. But the path was not smooth. Gutenberg encountered financial troubles. He had borrowed funds from Johann Fust, a wealthy backer, and they quarreled over debts and business matters. I watched helplessly as Fust sued Gutenberg, eventually seizing much of the printing equipment. Gutenberg's dream nearly collapsed under the weight of legal battles. I had to choose sides. Out of loyalty, I stuck with Gutenberg, helping him re-establish a smaller workshop. He never fully recovered his fortunes, but the seed was planted. Other printers, Schoeffer, Mentalin, Swinheim, Panarts, sprang up across German cities, Italy, and beyond. The printing press was out in the world, unstoppable. Explosive growth. Once printers caught on, the technology spread like wildfire. By the late 15th century, printing presses dotted Europe. Strasbourg, Cologne, Nuremberg, Venice, Paris, London. Books printed before 1501 we now call incunabula, the cradle of printing. Scholars heralded a new era. Knowledge could be disseminated quickly, uniformly, on a scale never seen before. I travelled to Venice in 1472, working briefly with a printer named Nicholas Jensen. Venice was a vibrant hub of trade and culture. Italian humanists clamoured for copies of Greek and Roman classics. Printers responded by publishing them in newly perfected Roman typefaces and, soon, Italic. The printed word revitalized classical learning. The age of humanism. My time in Venice immersed me in the ferment of the Renaissance. Intellectuals like Erasmus of Rotterdam championed the idea that reading the Bible and classical authors in original languages could reform church and society. They needed printed texts for wide distribution. A single copy would be read by many, generating lively debate in universities and courts. The synergy between printing and humanism was extraordinary. Greek texts, once painfully rare, now circulated in multiple printed editions. Latin classics found new life in elegant typography. Vernacular languages gained prestige as well, with translations made accessible to lay readers. I aided in printing some works by Cicero, Plato's dialogues in Latin translation, and newly edited versions of the Vulgate Bible. Each project felt like building a bridge between past and present, reviving ancient voices for a modern audience. Religious upheaval. Yet, the printed press stirred controversy. Around 1517, a monk named Martin Luther posted his 95 Theses in Wittenberg, challenging church practices. Printers snapped up his texts and spread them across Germany at lightning speed. Within weeks, Luther's ideas reached thousands. The Reformation shattered Christendom's unity. I remember printing stacks of Luther's pamphlets in a workshop near Nuremberg. The demand was insatiable. Word had it that church authorities denounced him as a heretic, but the more they condemned him, the more people clamored for his writings. The printing press proved unstoppable, fueling theological debate like an unquenchable flame. The English Bible. Elsewhere, William Tyndale dared to translate the Bible into English. This was forbidden by the Church, which feared heretical versions. Still, Tyndale's New Testament saw printing in Cologne and Worms, then smuggled into England. My heart raced at the daring of these men, risking imprisonment or death for the conviction that ordinary folk should read Scripture in their own tongue. I realized that the printed book had become a potent instrument, not just for preserving knowledge, but for challenging authority. Once circulated, words became difficult to suppress. Paper and press. A key driver of printing's growth was the increasing availability of paper, imported from the East. Paper mills sprouted in France, Italy, Germany. Paper was cheaper than parchment, allowing for larger print runs. Presses refined their mechanisms, screw presses improved, inking methods advanced. Printers experimented with typefaces, culminating in beloved designs like Aldine Italic by Aldus Manutius in Venice. I recall one job printing a large quantity of Bibles for a French bookseller. The press roared day and night, teams of workers setting type, inking forms, pressing pages, hanging them to dry. The mechanical rhythm was mesmerizing. Pull, press, release, turn page, repeat. In a single day, we could produce hundreds of sheets. Shifting authority. By the mid-16th century, I was an older man. The world I knew in my youth, where manuscripts were meticulously handwritten in monastic scriptoria, was receding. Universities, scholars, merchants, and common readers wanted books quickly and affordably. The Church attempted to control the flow of ideas through the index of prohibited books, but clandestine presses churned out banned works. Political leaders also realized the power of the press. Kings and princes commissioned official proclamations, circulated them widely. Censorship laws sprang up, but controlling multiple independent presses was daunting. The genie was out of the bottle. Legacy and reflection. Now, as I sit by the Rhine in my twilight years, I recall my days in Gutenberg's workshop with a mixture of nostalgia and awe. We had no notion of the colossal forces we were unleashing. The printing press not only multiplied texts, but also multiplied voices, voices that could question, innovate, or incite. I've witnessed men burn books in an attempt to halt unwanted ideas. Yet, the knowledge once printed rarely vanishes entirely. A copy always survives somewhere, secreted away in a library or personal collection. That unstoppable replication is the hallmark of this new age. What would Gutenberg think if he saw how widespread printing has become? My guess is he'd beam with pride, though part of him might lament the strife it has caused. Nonetheless, I believe he'd stand by his conviction that knowledge, once shared, can uplift humanity toward the modern world. And so, as I pen these memories, ironically, by hand, I observe the unstoppable march of printing. Workshops are bigger, more efficient. Books are cheaper, more diverse. The once cherished illuminated manuscript is now a rarity, an art form for special commissions. The codex form, printed on paper, is the present and the future. Printers talk of new techniques, new typefaces, expansions beyond religious or classical texts, printed herbals, astronomy treatises, geographies describing the newly discovered lands across the ocean. Soon, the world's knowledge might be at every scholar's fingertips, thanks to the invention that took root in our little Mainz workshop. In my final reflection, the press unlocked the voices of the masses. It shaped the Reformation, fueled the Renaissance, and planted seeds of modern science. No longer is learning the monopoly of cloistered monks or a privileged elite. The printed book belongs to everyone, or at least it soon will. I close my eyes, recalling the clank of Gutenberg's press, the rhythmic hum of metal type kissing paper. We had harnessed technology to replicate words, bridging distances, bridging centuries. That press, indeed, was heard around the world. Episode 6. Digital Dawns, 19th Century to Present Day. My name is Michaela Torres, and I grew up in a small town in Texas during the late 20th century. By the time I was born, books were everywhere. Paperbacks lining supermarket shelves, glossy picture books in children's libraries, leather-bound classics displayed in grand homes. Yet, in my lifetime, I would witness another seismic shift in how books are made and consumed. Industrialization of books. When I studied history in college, I learned how the 19th century introduced steam-powered presses, linotype machines, and mass-market printing. Suddenly, books became cheaper than ever. Public libraries emerged, making literature available to ordinary citizens. Literacy rates soared. Novels like Dickens's Oliver Twist, once serialized, reached vast audiences. In America, entrepreneurs like Robert Hoe refined rotary presses that could print thousands of pages per hour. By the early 20th century, publishing houses flourished. paperbacks, thanks to improvements in pulp paper, turned books into affordable commodities. My grandmother recalled how dime novels and pulp magazines spread across the country by train and stagecoach, fueling imaginations in remote towns. The rise of corporate publishing. By the late 20th century, major publishing conglomerates formed. Large houses in New York, London, and elsewhere controlled much of the book market. Bestsellers soared to million-copy print runs, aided by marketing and distribution networks. Bookstores, small and large, sprouted in every city. I remember the excitement of walking into a chain bookstore, the new releases displayed prominently. Meanwhile, mail-order book clubs thrived, delivering monthly selections to subscribers. My parents had shelves of hardcover novels that arrived via such clubs. A new frontier, digital technology. In my teens, personal computers became mainstream. We typed essays in word processors. We played text-based adventure games. We discovered the early internet, where bulletin boards and news groups formed small reading communities. But it was still largely an era of printed books. The idea of a digital book was more science fiction than reality. That changed rapidly in the late 1990s when the dot-com boom took off. Websites sold books online. Most famously, Amazon started as an online bookstore in 1994. Suddenly, you could order any title from your living room, and a physical copy would arrive by mail within days. Brick-and-mortar bookstores felt the pressure, some adapting, others closing. E-books emerge. Around the turn of the millennium, dedicated devices for electronic reading, early e-readers, began popping up. They had rudimentary screens, clunky interfaces. But the seed was planted. Digital texts could be downloaded and read electronically. In 2007, Amazon introduced the Kindle. That moment stands out in my memory, a sleek device with an e-ink screen that mimicked the contrast of ink on paper, easy on the eyes. You could buy a book and start reading in under a minute. No shipping, no trip to the store, just a click, and it appeared. Publishers scrambled to figure out digital rights management, pricing, and royalties. Some resisted, fearing e-books would cannibalize print sales. Others embraced the new revenue stream. Readers rejoiced or lamented depending on whether they loved the smell of paper or the convenience of digital. The self-publishing revolution. A parallel development was the rise of self-publishing platforms. Writers no longer needed a traditional publisher's approval. They could upload their manuscript to Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing or similar services and sell directly to readers. Some unknown authors found immense success, bypassing the traditional gatekeepers. It was reminiscent of Gutenberg's day, a democratization of publishing, unleashing countless voices into the market. Of course, this also led to an explosion of content. Quality varied widely. Review systems, algorithms, and social media buzz became crucial filters. Still, the fact remained. The digital age had shattered many barriers to entry in the publishing world. Audiobooks and multimedia. Another leap, audiobooks. Once the domain of cassette tapes or CDs, they transformed into digital downloads and streaming. Services like Audible, acquired by Amazon in 2008, turned commutes into reading time. Narration quality soared with professional voice actors, even celebrity readers. Many discovered they could consume books while driving, exercising, or cooking. By the 2010s, the concept of a book expanded beyond text on a page or screen. Interactive e-books added videos, animations, or quizzes. Hyperlinks connected readers to external resources. The line between book and app blurred. For children's literature, interactive storybooks on tablets became a new frontier. The print revival. Amid all this digital upheaval, print books showed surprising resilience. Independent bookstores, after suffering closures, staged a comeback in the 2010s by offering community events, cozy atmospheres, and curated selections. Many readers, myself included, still cherished the tactile experience of flipping paper pages. Studies suggested that reading comprehension might be better with print, or that reading print fosters deeper immersion. Publishers adopted print-on-demand technology, reducing the need for large warehousing. Supply chains became more efficient. Hardcovers and paperbacks coexisted with e-books and audiobooks, each fulfilling different reader preferences. The future, global and digital. Now, in the 2020s, as I reflect on the entire timeline of book evolution, I marvel at how far we've come. From Sumerian clay tablets to Egyptian papyrus scrolls, from the codex revolution of antiquity to the illuminated manuscripts of medieval Europe, from Gutenberg's printing press to industrial mass production, culminating in the digital renaissance of our era. It's a continuous thread of innovation. Books, whether physical or digital, remain central to culture, knowledge, and personal growth. Today, I can download a centuries-old classic in seconds, or walk into a local indie bookstore and browse newly released novels. I can listen to a gripping audiobook while jogging, or watch a child engage with an interactive e-book that fosters early literacy. The possibilities are endless. Libraries in the digital age. Libraries, too, have adapted. Public libraries offer e-book lending through digital platforms. Academic libraries maintain vast online databases, giving researchers access to journals and texts from across the globe. The concept of an infinite library is closer than ever, thanks to digitization projects like Google Books. Yet, controversies abound regarding copyright, fair use, and the ethics of scanning entire libraries. Still, the impetus remains to share knowledge widely. The dream that once stirred scribes in medieval scriptoria or fueled Gutenberg's bold vision lives on in the open-access movements of today. Book culture, a hybrid existence. In my living room, I see a shelf of physical books. My favorites, well-worn, spines cracked from repeated readings. Next to it, my Kindle lies on a side table, loaded with hundreds of titles I may or may not read. On my phone, I have an audiobook app featuring the latest bestseller, read by a stage actor. Each format serves a different mood or context. Meanwhile, new authors continue to break out thanks to viral social media campaigns, crowd-funded projects, or unconventional marketing. Small presses find niche audiences. Graphic novels thrive in print and digital alike. Cookbooks, often beloved in physical form for their visuals, also flourish online with embedded videos. And academic texts, once prohibitively expensive, can sometimes be found in open-access formats. An ongoing evolution, reflecting on the total arc, clay tablets, Mesopotamia, the dawn of written records. Papyrus scrolls, Egypt, a lighter medium, fueling bureaucracies and religious texts. Codex, Greco-Roman to medieval, a revolutionary binding method that spread with Christianity and literacy. Illuminated manuscripts, Middle Ages, sacred art preserving knowledge in turbulent times. Printing press, Gutenberg onward, mass production, fueling the Renaissance, Reformation, and modern age. Industrial and digital eras, mechanized presses, global publishing, e-books, audiobooks, self-publishing. Where do we go from here? The future might hold further innovations, perhaps immersive virtual reality books or AI-generated narratives tailored to individual preferences. But the essence remains. Books are vehicles of thought, memory, and creativity. Formats change, yet the fundamental drive to share stories and knowledge endures. A personal note. I sometimes feel nostalgic for the smell of an old library, dust motes floating in the sunlight. I also appreciate the convenience of reading an e-book on a long flight without lugging a heavy tome. Both experiences enrich my life in distinct ways. As I see it, the variety of formats only broadens the reach of reading, connecting more people to words and ideas. If there's one lesson from the grand history of books, it's that technology and tradition intertwine. Clay turned to papyrus, papyrus to parchment, parchment to paper, paper to pixels. Each step faced skepticism, each step found acceptance over time. The story of books is a story of resilience, adaptation, and the human passion for words that persists across millennia. And thus, I close the final page on this reflective journey. Or, more accurately, I tap the screen to end the ebook, or perhaps I set down this well-worn paperback. Whichever the case, the story continues. Final author's closing. May this saga remind us that the history of books is still being written by every reader, every writer, and every technological advance that reshapes the way we share our stories and ideas.